Welcome back, Defenders. This sounds bad. Fuel crisis in Russia worsens. No let-up in Ukrainian drone bombardment. As the West dithers with its sanctions on Russian petroleum products, Ukraine has been honing its own very effective drone sanctions on Russian energy output. It's so bad that Putin has finally acknowledged it. Putin admits Russia faces gas shortage amid Ukraine's strikes on energy infrastructure. Speaking at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok, Putin said that signs of gas shortages are already visible in Russia's Far East. He said that supplying new enterprises can be challenging, and demand for gas is expected to rise significantly in the Far East Federal District in the coming years. He didn't mention the reasons behind the potential shortage. Putin suggested switching to coal reserves, which will last for almost 1,000 years. That's Russia's solution. Why don't we burn some more coal? And here's a summary of the strikes, and the timing of this is kind of odd. There's not been a new strike on a Russian oil refinery in the last 4 days, and they started this strategy basically on August 1st. So this is August 2nd, the Ryazan oil refinery, and then they struck all the way through August 30th. This is the Syzran. This is the unmanned forces of Ukraine. They released this slick video. I'll link it down below, basically recapping the entire month of August. And they're saying that 24.2% of Russia's oil refining capacity has been knocked offline. That is a quarter of Russia's oil refining capacity is gone. It's going to take them months or years to repair all these facilities and get back to 100%. And we're seeing the results. These pictures and videos are going viral every day. We've seen the shortages in the Far East. There's been parts of Siberia, as well as Crimea and the occupied territories. This is the city of Luhansk. Look how long this car queue is. People lining up hoping to get gas at this station.
Ну, эпопея с бензином также, смотрю, продолжается. Очередяхи, конечно, такие веселые. Да уж. Ого! Почти что до самой Буденновой, блин, очередь. По-моему, с бензином все хуже и хуже, наверное. Или не знаю.
That's a gas line more than 1 kilometer long. If you're living in the occupied territories, you need a good bicycle. A bicycle is going to be the only way you're going to get around. And this is a video. I'm going to share it. This isn't like a gas line, but this is a gas station in Moscow saying that they're out of fuel. This is a 95 RON octane. So this person goes up to the attendant and asks about gas, and this one gas station in Moscow is out of fuel. So I'm going to share this. Let's think about it. So this Russian in the capital city is going to talk about it. I don't have the translation, but yeah, Putin is doing everything he can to avoid this. He does not want the people of Moscow and St. Petersburg being inconvenienced in any way. So if there's a shortage, it's going to be the occupied territories, Siberia, and the Far East that are not going to get their fuel. But Putin is going to do everything he can to avoid this situation of gas lines in the capital city. Gasoline prices in Russia continue to soar, beating the August record. So the price surge, which began earlier this summer, has seen wholesale costs soar by over 50% since January. This is an all-time high for gasoline prices in Russia, and they're never going back down. It's never going to get better. As long as this war continues, the price of gasoline in Russia is only going to keep going up. Ukraine creates new security guarantee to protect itself from Russia. This is an update on the new Flamingo cruise missile. We've got good news and we've got bad news. So the company who produces this missile, this is a private Ukrainian company called Firepoint, they did announce they're going to start producing solid rocket fuel at a factory in Denmark. So thank you so much, Denmark, for allowing this company to produce the rocket fuel on your territory. But I do think that this company is looking for investment. They're putting out videos hoping that more people will throw billions of dollars at them so that they can increase production, produce more weapons, and ultimately, I assume, make a profit. But we're trying to assess how effective are these Flamingo missiles. 4 or 5 days ago, Ukraine test-launched 3 of these against the Russians. These are ground-launched cruise missiles, and there was this FSB outpost in Crimea outside of Gimler's range, which is why Ukraine wanted to test it. The good news is that one of the missiles hit the FSB outpost. You can see there was a direct hit on this building. Excellent. Very effective. That's the good news. The bad news is a second missile was off by about 180 meters. It slammed into the coastline and caused a fire and some damage, but I don't think that was the intended target. And the third missile either failed or was shot down over the ocean. So Ukraine test-launched 3 Flamingos against the Russians. 1 was a hit, 1 was a near miss, and 1 somehow failed. This is a GIF from the HBO series Chernobyl. Not great, but not terrible. So I think Ukraine is still trying to assess how effective are these Flamingo cruise missiles going to be. Ukrainian firm behind the Flamingo unveils new FP, this is Firepoint 7, Firepoint 9 ballistic missiles, as well as an air defense system. So this company is trying to get more money. They're trying to get more resources to scale production, build new factories, hire new people, and they've produced a cruise missile, and they say they have the designs for ballistic missiles as well as air defense systems. This is all being worked on in real time while Ukraine is trying to fight a war and hold the Russians back, so there's going to be some confusing information, and I hope this is real. I hope this is not just a wonder weapon myth and then it fizzles out and we never hear from it again, but I do think this is real, and I think Ukraine's military is going to use a couple more Flamingos in the coming week to continue testing them. Aside from that, Ukraine's drone production is still going strong. They are getting effective hits inside of Russia with these drones. This is the Unecha oil pumping station for the Druzhba oil pipeline. This is the pipeline that goes through Bryansk that eventually sells oil to Slovakia and Hungary. And Ukraine struck it. The pipeline was down. The Russians fixed it. Ukraine struck it again. The Russians, I think, fixed it again. Ukraine struck it again. So to the best of my knowledge, the pipeline is offline, but here's the satellite image, and you can see the damage to this pumping station. And there are dozens of these pumping stations going all across Russia to make these pipelines flow. Russia can't protect all of them. And if a single one goes down, you got to turn the pipeline off. Aside from that, Ukraine has been going after air defense systems in Crimea. This was a S-300 launcher as well as a 9S-36 radar. I'll link this video down below if you want to see it go boom. When Ukraine successfully strikes an air defense system, they make for really good explosions. Aside from that, Ukraine has been going after these radars. This is a Nebu-U long-range air surveillance radar. We have the firm data that there was a fire at this location. Ukraine also struck a radar base in Anapa. It's under attack as of last night. So this is a recap of the 4 radar installations that Ukraine has targeted in the last 2 weeks. Here are the locations on the map. Radars here, 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 and here. what valuable military target is in this general area that Ukraine is trying to soften the defenses for, and it's the bridge. I think Ukraine really wants to take a shot at this bridge, but they don't want to fail. So they're going after the radars, they're going after the telescopes, they're going after the air defense systems, anything that allows the Russians to see what's coming before it arrives. Ukrainian deep drone strike inside Russia hits railway station, delays 26 trains for hours. Ukraine's never going to stop hitting Russia's rail network. This is Russia's Achilles heel. They are entirely dependent on rail transport to supply their military in the war zone, so these deep strikes on Russian rail networks are never going to stop. Sanctions bite. Russian steel output collapses to lowest point since the invasion. Here are the economic headlines. This is a giant tumbling in real time. It's going to take months, but the downward spiral for the Russian economy has begun. All of the signs are there. Wartime pressures push Russian corporate losses to highest levels since the COVID pandemic. You know how bad businesses were doing when everyone had to stay home and nobody was spending money? That's what Russia is experiencing right now. This is how badly Russian businesses are performing. Nearly 1/3 of Russia's biggest companies are reporting losses for the year 2025 so far. So the banks are freaking out. Russian economy slipped into a technical stagnation. This is the CEO of Sberbank. So let's see here. A main driver, of course, is the key interest rate. According to our internal estimates at Sberbank, the rate will be around 14% by the end of the year. Is that enough for the economy to start recovering? In our view, it is not. Given the current level of inflation, recovery can only be expected when the rate is at 12% or lower. This is Russia's central bank, and it's been close to 20% for 2 years because inflation in Russia is so terrible. Inflation is terrible because the Kremlin is spending unlimited amounts of money for the military. All of these soldier sign-up bonuses and death payments, it's causing horrendous inflation in Russia. So the central bank had to raise rates, but raising rates basically is killing all of Russia's businesses and industries not related to the war. If you're selling weapons to the Kremlin or signing up to die in Ukraine, you're doing fine. But it's every other sector, it's every other person in Russia who is being strangled by these extremely high central bank rates. That's Ukraine's strategy. Win. What is Russia's strategy? And they're sticking with terrorism. No sleep in Ukraine for civilians as air raid alert lasts for 13 hours and 500 weapons fly from Russia. This was last night's drone and missile attack, 526 drones and missiles. Here's their flight path, and if at first you don't succeed, just keep doing the same thing for 3 years, hoping something will happen. That has been Russia's strategy in the air. Just blowing up whatever you can find. Here is President Zelensky. Last night, Russia launched another massive strike, nearly 500 drones and over 20 missiles, including ballistic. These strikes are now regular, several times a week, a clear signal that Russia rejects any attempt to end the war and wants to keep fighting. We must assume this is Russia's main scenario now. Russia doesn't want peace. They don't want to stop this war. They're never going to agree to a ceasefire. This is a genocide, and they're trying to steal Ukraine's territory. But there's a very interesting detail about this airstrike from last night. This is being reported that 3 of Russia's long-range strategic bombers failed to achieve their objective, launching a cruise missile. So this is 3 Tu-160s, the supersonic bombers. If you remember, 1/3 of Russia's strategic bomber fleet was destroyed in Operation Spiderweb. This was a little over 2 months ago. So they're having to just get into the air whatever they have to launch these missiles against Ukrainian cities. And one of the Tu-160s failed to take off from angles, it had a mechanical failure. One failed to launch its missiles due to a mechanical failure. And then one claims that it was struck by lightning and it had to abort its mission. I don't know if that's true, but 3 of Russia's strategic bombers failed to deliver their payloads in a combat mission. That is a horrendous failure rate for Russia's Air Force. Stay tuned. Let's get to the politics news, and this was the big event in China. Shanghai summit shows old world order is dead. I actually agree with this, guys. I think the post-World War II rules-based international system is gone, and we're not going to get it back. We've got another 3.5 years of Donald Trump. He is never going to defend international law or respect international norms. So we're in uncharted territory, and the dictatorships of the world are seizing upon this weakness from the United States to create a new world order. And the countries leading this charge are China and Russia. And China had an economic event 2 days ago, but yesterday was a military parade to celebrate China's liberation from Japan in World War II. And it's the Chinese, they know how to put on a good military parade. I would rate China's above Russia's, and obviously way better than the United States. So this is the full 2-hour parade. I'll link the YouTube video down below if you want to check it out. And it's a military parade. Dictators love them. And this is the striking image. This is what the global media was supposed to take away from this event. You've got fascist Russia and communist North Korea flanking the Emperor of China. This is the new world order. A world dominated by fascist authoritarian regimes. Iran was there as well. But this is supposed to frighten you. This is supposed to be not an indication of their soft power or their economic power, but pure military. If you look at the size of the Chinese military, the size of the Russian military, the size of the North Korean military, they're basically saying hard power is the only thing that matters. How many tanks do you have? How many nukes do you have? That is the only thing that people are going to acknowledge and respect politically going forward for the rest of this century. Putin and Xi caught on hot mic discussing longevity and immortality. There was this stupid walk moment of all the leaders, and for some reason Xi's microphone was still broadcasting to the press pool, so this video got out of what Xi and Putin were talking about, and surprise, they were talking about usual dictator stuff. This is what Xi is saying in Mandarin. These days, 70 years old. Earlier, people rarely lived to 70. But these days, 70 years, you are still a child. Putin says something and the microphone on Xi is not picking it up. Xi then says, with the development of biotechnology, human organs can be continuously transplanted and people can live younger and younger and even achieve immortality. Predictions are this century there's a chance of also living to 150 years old. So when dictators get together, what do they talk about? And they talk about finding a way to live forever. Xi is 72 years old, Putin is 72 years old, and they're talking about forcefully harvesting people's organs to extend their own lives. This is how crazy and delusional these people are. Xi wants to live for another 70 years, to rule China for another 70 years. Putin wants to live for another 70 years, and to rule Russia for another 70 years. I feel like this should be a bigger news story than it currently is, but the entire world is kind of on fire. Here are thoughts from Ilya Ponomarenko. When you read about these overheard conversations between Putin and Xi about extending life to 150 years and achieving immortality through constant organ transplants, you realize that the unfree world is ruled by deranged men with a gargantuan thirst for boundless power, and they would gladly throw all of humanity into the meat grinder just to cling for one extra hour to their throne with a dead hand. The free and democratic world has serious problems. I'm here on YouTube screaming every day that people need to wake up, that we are being threatened, that the rest of this century is going to be incredibly dangerous as dictators, Xi, Putin, and Kim Jong-un, want to redraw the maps and steal their neighbors' resources and accumulate the biggest, most powerful militaries in the world to achieve immortality, harvesting organs. Like, these people are insane. Russia prepared to keep fighting if Ukraine diplomacy fails, according to Putin. Surprise, surprise, diplomacy is failing because Russia is not engaging in good faith diplomacy. Therefore, Russia gets to continue the war they started, and it's because diplomacy failed for some reason. Putin gave a speech at the Chinese summit. Let me give you basically the summary of Putin's speech.
И она угрожает. До свидания.
This is how I know this is the real Putin. The real Putin constantly clears his throat when speaking. He probably cleared his throat about 30 times, and the Putin that showed up in Alaska didn't do that. So I'm very confident this was the real Putin. The only thing of note worth mentioning is that he did talk about talking with Trump about meeting Zelensky, and of course, he lied to Trump. This is Putin being asked if he's going to agree to a bilateral or trilateral meeting with Zelensky. It's possible, and I never refused it, if this meeting is well prepared, and it will possibly lead to some positive results. By the way, Donald asked me to hold such a meeting if it's possible. I said yes, it's possible. In the end, if Zelensky is ready, let him come to Moscow, and such a meeting will take place. This is Putin saying he will only meet Zelensky if Zelensky travels to Moscow and agrees to all of Russia's conditions, meaning to surrender. So this isn't going to happen. Here's Bill Browder. Putin made multiple attempts to assassinate Zelensky at the beginning of the war, and they all failed. Now he asks him to come to Moscow? Perhaps Putin should go to Kyiv. Or The Hague. This is actually potentially the top story of today's video. I don't think this is going to get a lot of attention, but this is very significant. Russia and China signed deal to advance Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. This has been Putin's #1 request from the Chinese for 3.5 years. Putin has been begging Xi for 3.5 years to finance and build this Power of Siberia 2 pipeline. This goes from Russia's oil and gas fields in the Arctic through Mongolia to mainland China. For more than 3 years, the Chinese have been refusing to finance and build this pipeline because they were afraid of sanctions from the United States. But because the United States is so weak now, because Donald Trump refuses to sanction anyone, the Chinese aren't afraid. These Chinese banks and construction companies are fine partnering with the Russians to build this pipeline because they don't think the United States and Donald Trump are going to do anything. I don't know how fast the Chinese can build this pipeline, perhaps as short as a year, but this is bad news. This is going to be a lot of money going to the Russians to help fund their war machine once the pipeline is completed. Now, I could be cynical here, and maybe the Chinese finally agreed to it because they're seeing weakness from the Russians. If China someday wants to send their military north and steal all this territory, then they have to build this pipeline anyways. So I think the Chinese are fine starting it now, and if something bad happens to Russia over the next year, well, that's China's pipeline now. They needed it anyways. But things are getting bad. This is a member of the State Duma Committee on Education, and they're saying that Chinese could now be mandatory in all Russian schools. So little children growing up in St. Petersburg and Moscow are going to start learning Mandarin, because that is who their owners are. That is who their masters are. Chinese companies export, Russia kills, while trade between countries hits a record 240 billion euros. This was a story in the Telegraph. Chinese companies directly supplied at least 55 million euros worth of parts and materials to sanctioned Russian firms between 2023 and 2024. During this period, Moscow was actively building large-scale logistics infrastructure for its drone program. So China says we don't supply lethal aid. We don't send weapons to Russia. But Chinese companies are perfectly happy supplying all the components that Russia needs to assemble their own drones and missiles or whatever. The Chinese are supporting the Russians, and I think with the election of Donald Trump, they're increasing their support. They want to see Russia win so that Europe is fractured. Europe is fractured right now. Europe cannot unify to stand up to China and potentially whatever China wants to do the next decade. Additionally, as long as this war is going on, it's a distraction to the United States military. So when China finally wants to move on Taiwan or any of their neighbors in the South China Sea, the United States isn't going to do anything. Donald Trump isn't going to do anything to help anyone in the world. Putin meets Slovak Prime Minister Fico in Beijing, praises his independent policy. I do want to highlight this moment in this, walkathon of mass murdering dictators. And there's Fico, the Prime Minister of Slovakia, proudly standing with autocrats. Now I know not everyone in this picture is an autocrat. You've got, I think, the president of Kazakhstan here, but if you remove China from this picture, all of these other countries combined equal about 6% of global GDP. The people, the common people of these countries, most of them don't live in good conditions. They don't have a high standard of living. They're not economically prosperous like China. So China is the goal. They're the leader of all of these dictators. But why? Why would Fico want to be in this group picture? Why would he want to stand with this coalition? And he'd rather be a servant. He'd rather be a toad to Xi and the Chinese than an equal partner in the European Union and in NATO. So I know this is bleak. I know these pictures they're supposed to demoralize us, guys, but I'm still confident they're going to lose. This post I wrote about a year ago, and it's long. I'm going to read it, but I'm going to explain my thesis why all these dictators are going to lose. Russia rightfully fears the power of NATO, not because NATO ever had plans to attack Russia, but because NATO exists as a power entity in the world outside of an imperial structure. To join NATO, you first have to be a democracy with universal suffrage. NATO is an organization that free nations willingly join. This means that NATO never has to waste resources on maintaining control over NATO territory. The state of Russia has always been based on the conquest of new peoples who do not want to be part of Russia. The Russians under the original empire and their Soviet Union reincarnation were always tied up with internal conflicts and security concerns. The Russians have always had to spend vast resources on surveillance and secret police to keep their conquered peoples and territories in line. The Kremlin is always ruled with fear. Therefore, Russia can never operate at full strength against an external enemy, because their empire would then crumble from within as different conquered peoples would rebel with the hopes of escaping the empire. Because NATO is a voluntary organization, every new nation that joins only adds strength to the alliance rather than subtracts from it. NATO does not have to worry about its member states going to war with each other. If NATO had to go to war against Russia, NATO would not have to waste resources putting down internal rebellions of nations who would use the conflict as an opportunity to escape NATO. It's voluntary. This is what Russia fears about NATO. Autocrats always think democracies are weak because they are, disorganized, chaotic, and everyone is always after their own self-interests. But democracies in the last 100 years have a long and bloodied history as some of the most warlike forms of government. And democracies have won most wars in the last century, whereas autocracies like modern Russia are frequently weak, utterly lacking in resilience, and extraordinarily brittle. Conscripts from impoverished regions of your empire make for terrible soldiers. They will be the first to rebel against their masters the second they sense weakness from the emperor. There is a good reason why democracies have won most wars in the last 150 years. And it's because, yeah, you can conscript 1 million people into your military in North Korea, but when they actually do have to fight, when the Chinese military actually has to fight, how effective are these fighting forces going to be? We've seen how effective Russia's military is. They're doing terrible. Russia is currently losing this war to Ukraine when they started with every advantage. 3 times the population, 10 times the military size. Russia has embarrassed themselves, and I think the Chinese are going to embarrass themselves as well as soon as they go to war. Oh yeah, and then there's my president. Trump says he's very disappointed in Putin. Every day there's clips and there's headlines of Trump saying something, but none of it means anything. He's just lying. He just makes up stuff every day. There's no plan. He has no clue what he's doing. He's not helping. Trump accuses China, Russia, and North Korea of conspiring against the US as Beijing holds large military parade. This is just Trump upset that's not him. Trump wants to be at the head of this picture with Putin on his right and Kim Jong-un on his left, looking like a badass. That's all Trump wants. A cool military parade with American soldiers goose-stepping to his honor. He's a sad, pathetic man who is going to die soon, probably, and he will have left no lasting mark on the history of the world. People will forget Trump pretty fast, probably within 10 years of him being dead. He has no lasting legacy, guys. There's a clip of him. This is the montage saying he can end the war in 24 hours, and then I'm going to give Putin 2 weeks, I'm going to give Putin 2 weeks, I'm going to give Putin 50 days, I'm going to give Putin 2 weeks, I'm going to give Putin 2 weeks. I'm not going to play the clip. It's pointless. I got my final video for you, but real quick I want to share this photograph. This is prisoner of war Alexander Strafun. He was released about 2.5 months ago, and this is what he looked like getting out of Russian captivity, and this is what he looks like today. He's eating, he's being treated well, he's recovering, and this is why Ukraine still fights. Final video, this is just a fun one. Somebody at the Arsenal metro station in Kyiv rode their bicycle down the escalator. And these are some pretty big escalators. That was impressive, but please don't do that. You could seriously injure yourself or injure somebody else on the escalator if they don't see you coming. But it was cool. Alright, that's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.